Two. All right, it's Pittsburgh Pat. I'm back here with Andy Hickly, the writer of an adaptation of Sleeping Beauty, and going to be the director. And are you are you the producer as well, or like how does
I'm
that
not
work?
the producer, no,
Oh,
just
okay,
the writer
okay,
director. Yeah.
okay. Oh, just
Mhm.
the director.
Yeah.
That's all, because that's not a big job at all.
No, no, of
Yeah,
course
yeah.
not. No.
And we're going to
Oh
do more
God.
videos as this comes closer. We'll talk more about that,
Sure. Yeah.
so we can promote this, because I think this is amazing. Uh,
Thank you.
you brought up something really interesting about Star Trek versus Star Wars, and I'd like to
Oh,
talk about that. But before we get to that, I really do want to hit the fact that this man that I'm talking to the audience, smash like for him. This
oh,
man was on stage last January, I think it was,
it
in
was last March.
last March in Il Trovatore, and died on stage in a sword fight.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Like,
It
I
was,
want to do that one day.
that was I that's like a bucket list item I don't think I realized I had was performing on the Benetton stage while some of the best opera performers are singing inches from me, and then I get stabbed and die.
The
uh
Pittsburgh Opera, this is no small thing. This is
no.
amazing. This is world class. These people go on tour to Europe, to Australia, to Asia. Like, this is nothing to, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah, it's
and you
it's
got
it's
killed
nothing
by
to
like
sneeze.
the lead character.
I did the main antagonist, and I cannot remember his last name. Lester was his name, his first name.
Mhm.
Phenomenal guy, very very sweet. Because I we did a little bit of a sword fight before he kills me, and so I got to partner with him. Um, and he was great. Like like we worked really well together. He was so considerate and just like, I loved working with him.
Everybody
And
that I've met in like I guess you'd call it the industry, is like so nice.
yeah, I'm so glad that because you hear about people talk about like opera divas, and when we the fighters were prepping beforehand before we got to meet any of the talent, we were sort of like, well, we don't know what we're gonna get. We planned out some of the fights, but we're like, well, it will depend on what they're up for, because it was fully within their rights to be like, no, we're not going to do that. There's a great story about Pavarotti. I don't know what show it was where he had a sword fight, I guess, and he famously was like, "Okay, I'm going to stand here, and then you all do whatever." And the fight was like, "Yep, okay, it's your Pavarotti. I'm not going to say no to you."
Well,
So
when you're
they had to.
Pavarotti, yeah, you get to do that.
Sure. Yeah. So, we were like, oh, we don't know what we're going to get. And John and Lester could not have been nicer. They were so great. John, who played Manrico, the titular Trovatore, the troubadour, was he was in hog heaven. I think the way that he lit up when we put a sword in his hand, and you could watch it when he did his fights, he would do a little molinet before he would go into his fight. Like, he was living a dream. And that was very cool to have gotten to kind of just be tangentially a part of that.
So when you told me about that, you just like, we're just talking casually after D&D
Yeah.
one time, and you're just like, yeah,
What?
blah blah blah. I did that, the opera thing, and I'm like, what? How
And
do
like,
I get to,
I
like,
hope I hope
I'm like, how did you get that job? And then you
yeah.
said that your your choreography instructor was
Yeah.
approached, and then you're like, yeah, we got some people.
Yeah, yeah, it was a really cool opportunity because I've been taking classes now. I've been doing stage combat for a couple of years now. I'm trying to think exactly how long. I think since I've been out of school, so it's been about, oh gosh, like 8 or 9 years now that
Oh,
I've been doing
wow.
combat. I've done like dabbled in some stuff like when I was in school, but like like working with professional choreographers, it's been about 8 or 9 years. um, and um, and that's been great. Taking the classes has been uh, it's been 3 years now, where I've been getting official certifications from the Society of American Fight Directors.
Right.
Tanya Lynn, our teacher, phenomenal teacher, phenomenal
Yeah. And
choreographer.
Adam.
Um, and Adam
Mhm.
Rutledge, of course, he's Tanya's partner. They're they're a great duo.
They really
um,
are. They really
yeah.
are. And that, let's tell the audience why we. So the reason I know these guys, because you were like, yeah, like come, like take these classes, and it just so happened that like I got in at the beginning of a cycle,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh, this is great because I took fencing when I was in high school and college, and
Hmm.
and it's not fighting. So this, let's just state, like this is not a martial art. There are martial aspects to it, but we're trying not to hit each other.
Exactly.
We're trying to
It's
make it
it's a
look like we're hitting each other.
Yeah, it's a lot closer to dance than actual fighting, because it is so much of it's partnering. It's working with somebody else to create a very cool stage picture.
So we
Um,
actually got to work together this
yeah, I
week
love.
for the first time, and
Yeah,
that was a blast for me. I just want to say, like, that
it
was
was a blast for me.
fantastic.
Thank you.
And I've been fortunate. I've been at this. So this is my fourth class.
Mhm.
We're doing for those in the audience. We're doing uh quarterstaff. So
Yeah,
I thought, oh, swords. Well, and then I'm like, quarterstaffs, but I really want to do swords. And now I'm
uh,
like, ooh, these are awesome. Like these are really fun.
oh yeah. But and if I can, welcome to my world because I've been waiting to do Sword and Shield for 3 years now.
And
So
it's
it's like
not there
every time
yet.
I'm like, soon. Yeah, I
Yeah.
and it's very much a logistical reason. Tanya and Adam provide all of their own equipment. Everything that we use comes from their personal armory. And as it stands right now, the equipment that they would need to teach a full semester of Sword and Shield, they don't have. And it's I mean, it's very expensive. So like I keep like gently pestering Tanya. I'm like, hey Tanya, I'm gonna get my own Sword and Shield, and
Hmm.
that's one less you have to worry about, right? So like
I'm up
that
for
means we
that.
could do it.
I'll do the same thing.
Hey,
Yep.
I'll send you
Absolutely.
links about where to get stuff. It's
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I know
Then
that you
then there will be
actually
two of
own
us.
a rapier.
I do. It's so as far as like the technical specs of it go, it's a rapier style hilt with an
Okay.
epee blade.
Okay.
Yeah. So like in stage quick lesson for your audience, little stage combat blades, especially for kind of fencing style weapons, they're either epees, which the blade profile looks kind of like a little triangle. And then there's the Schlager blades, which are the flat ones. Sometimes they call them musketeer blades. They have the ones that look a little bit more like rapiers and stuff that you'll see in movies.
Like an edged
Um,
weapon, like an actual
and
like
yeah, I mean it
knife,
has
like a long knife.
yeah, I mean it's still a dull edge, but like it is more of like it looks like an actual weapon as opposed to an epee blade is it's a fencing blade.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I have two of those, one for me, one for my wife. Um, and then we have three broadswords, and actually, wait, yeah, three broadswords. Um, we have four wooden trainers, and now two lightsabers.
Oh, well, that's
Mm.
right up my alley.
Yeah, yeah,
Anybody who watches my channel knows that I love me some lightsabers.
yeah.
And I
Ultra Sabers had a
have,
really good sale.
yeah, I don't have any Ultra Sabers yet. I was approached by Saber Forms and they gave me one to
Mm,
review, and I love it. And I Crimson Dawn, I have
nice.
a really nice one. Yeah, and I have a Damien Saber that I bought off of.
Mm,
But then I have probably, I think I'm up to like if you count the toy sabers that
mm,
are just like the plastic ones, then I probably have like 11 sabers. But if you count like the serious ones that like have
yeah.
sound fonts and
Ooh,
you can change the lights and stuff like that, I think I have like seven. So like, yeah,
that's
I'm becoming
awesome.
a collector. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, I'm becoming a collector too, just with all sorts of weapons. My wife and I, my wife Kelsey, um, we kind of met ish through doing stage combat.
tell us about that.
Yeah, so um, she worked the Pittsburgh Renaissance Festival a year before I did. The year that I joined, I got to do the stage show with them, which was a Shakespearean stage combat show, written by our good friend Michael Menendez. And we had a fight in the show, and we got partnered together. We had been we knew each other. We were friends. We were carpooling for the whole fair season. which was also part of how we got together. But that one of the first rehearsals, and we get weapons in hands, we learn the blocking, and Michael's like, okay, we're gonna run the fight and go. And Kelsey, she swings the sword over her head and lets out this ferocious battle cry. And I was really taken aback because I had been very used to the one who, like, I always felt like I was like the one that was going too intense. Like, I did a stage combat workshop in like middle school or high school, and I was really going for some of the pain reactions of the victim. And one of the people was like, okay, whoa, you can take it down a little bit, guy. And here was someone who was going just as hard as I was used to going. And I mean, that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
There's a whole long and lovely story about, how we eventually started dating. But, like, that's one of the moments I look back on. I'm like, yeah, that was telling. And
That's
we
my
do
girl.
that's my girl. Yeah. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
my beautiful wife. She's a circus artist too. Like, she's incredible. Quick plug, my wife, Love
Mm-hmm.
LP
Yeah.
on Instagram. She
I'm
does a
sorry,
lot
say
of
it again because I think I got the story.
Oh, it's okay. It's at La Belle Pitre. It's French for the beautiful clown.
La Belle
Um,
Pitre.
La Belle Pitre. Yeah, it's little periods, all lowercase, little periods in between each of the words. Um, yeah, she's incredible. We've gotten to do a lot of really cool, all sorts of theater stuff together, but really cool stage combat stuff too. I wish she could come to the Tuesday night classes, but unfortunately, she is airborne whenever we're swinging at each other with various weapons.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I picked up to like 6 foot lengths of like, dowel rods for me and my wife to practice with, and to like go outside and make the neighbors look at us and go like, what the heck? Because like the one time about a year ago or a year and a half ago, there was a snowstorm, a really good one that like kind of immobilized the streets. Like there weren't any cars out. And we took our lightsabers out into the dark and we had a fight in the snow, which yeah, that's on the channel. I'll put the link in the description.
Oh yeah, I gotta see
and
that.
I even did like the instead of doing, because YouTube doesn't like music if you use like the John Williams music, like it gets censored. So you can't monetize. So I did the just by like my hand, like and then I edited it like real like TikTok-y. And so it was a lot of fun. And so
I love we do stuff like that all the time. We had a show at the Pittsburgh Renaissance Festival, and we had some stage combat in it. And there was just something very fun about us being in our backyard swinging swords at each other.
Yes.
And the neighbors were like, what is going on over there?
So there's some kids that are pretty young in the backyard. There's 4 of them. One's babe in arms, and the other ones are like anywhere from like maybe 2.5 to like 6, 7 years old. And they play baseball back there sometimes. But like, so I'll go out and swing the lightsaber around. They just like look, they're like their hands up against the glass, their noses on the windows, like, what's going on out there? And then I just casually go back in the house after I do my like lightsaber routine. I'll do a couple Obi-Anis and then like, it's a lot of fun, especially in the dark,
Oh, yes.
Except someday I'll probably get run over by a deer or something.
Oh no.
Well, we have a bird feeder, and the feeder attracts other wildlife. So, so every once in a while something tramps through the yard. And lately there's been a couple deer, and they're big with like antlers. Like we had a hawk the other day. There was a hawk like in the tree in my backyard. I was like, big sucker. So
I love birds. They're so cool.
They are cool. So I was playing a druid actually. If we play this tier 3 that's coming up, I'll be a druid, so I'll be able to change into. I love changing into the birds. Yeah, the birds are fun to train.
I love that. Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we played this big long game over the pandemic. And my character had a magic flute that could summon this giant swarm of ravens, and that was one of my favorite things. Was just kind of like, well, it was really cool because I not everyone was there when I got the item, and we got into a tight spot later. And so then I pulled it out, and it happened. Everyone was like, "Wait, what's going on?" And that was one of the coolest I've ever felt playing a role playing game. Yeah, I love it.
Tootie tootie
You were
magic
gonna,
flutie.
yeah, a little magic flute. Yeah.
I love that. I love that they're like, okay, the scholar, wizard has to spend hours in the library going through arcane materials in order to gain his magical abilities. The warlock has to make a pact with another worldly being. The sorcerer is born with like this strange talent that he or she has to tame, and the bard goes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a good time.
So much easier. So yeah, so we tied that back into D&D, but before we get off of that, I just want to go into like the fight choreography. We got to do some fight choreography this time. Like the first 3 classes were more about learning the techniques and like the blocks and but we got to do dodges, and you're doing like the Princess Bride like scene where like they're starting the duel, right? Wesley and Inigo Montoya, and they do the
getting some of those rhythms into the fight.
I love that. Like, and like that was so much fun for me. But I gotta tell you, I could barely walk up steps on Wednesday. The lunges, I haven't done lunges. I mean, I used to be a fencer, but I haven't done those exercises in a long time. My flexors on the outside of especially my right leg, I was feeling it. I mean, I didn't injure myself, but I was like, wow, you did something. You need to
well, I got to tell you, I've been out of commission. I hurt my ankle. So last Tuesday was my first time back. I was in a similar spot on Wednesday. I was like, I am very aware of every muscle in my legs.
Yep.
A lot of lunges, a lot of lunges.
I was able to practice. Yeah, I was able to do my leg workout today though, so I'm pretty happy. It wasn't a perfect leg workout, but it was. I know that everything's like in the right place, so that's good.
That's good. Yeah.
So before we broke the first time, you mentioned something about Star Wars versus Star Trek. There's a lot of Star Wars content on my channel, and I also am a big fan of Star Trek. I don't cover that as much on my channel.
Sure.
But I've always wanted to talk about this, and you brought it up. So you were talking about like the comparison between, their fan bases, right? And how they react to their different, milieux. So tell me what you were thinking about when you brought that up.
So, I mean, this is something like, my wife is a big Trekkie. So this is something that we have talked about at length. And she, like, a lot of the Trekkie side of things are things that she has told me about. So a great example, when Star Trek first came out, people writing fan fiction. I believe Star Trek was like one of the first properties that people were starting to create fan content for in that way. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not as well versed in this.
Makes sense.
But so people were sort of like, some people are like, oh, Kirk and Spock, there's like a romantic tension there. And other people were like, no. They're just like, they have a very close friendship. That's what that dynamic is. And Gene Roddenberry took the middle ground in I think one of the most like clever ways possible, in that he created I think it's the Vulcan word Hyla, and that word for their relationship has several translations. It can mean, I think, brother, lover, husband. It doesn't translate one to one in English.
Partner.
So partner, yeah, exactly. So in doing that, he was kind of giving that creative freedom over to the fandom to say, look, I made this, but ultimately I'm giving you the agency to say this relationship is what you want to make it. And that's very cool. And that's a very inclusive way of dealing with the fandom. Now, on the other side of the fence, we look at stuff, in Star Wars. And Star Wars, George Lucas or at least was for a while, the final voice in what was canon and what wasn't. Mm-hmm. There wasn't that same kind of give and take interplay with the fan base when it came to that kind of engagement with the property. Yeah, and then that's not to say that George Lucas is like is a bad creator and doesn't respect his fans, but you notice the difference. There's a lot more collaboration, there's a lot more freedom with kind of the idea of fanon in the Star Trek universe. I mean, even with J.J. Abrams creating his new thing, it's sort of like nobody's really upset. It's sort of like, well, that's just another universe in the multiverse of Star Trek. How many different, versions of these characters and, alternate realities exist out there versus how the Star Wars fandom has reacted to all of the new content. You can pick any one of the movies, series, what have you. Everybody has a strong opinion about it, and it's harder to navigate that because that's it. There is no multiverse in Star Wars. It is what it is, and you either have to love it or hate it.
So here's my take on that. Lucas had a Bible, right? He had the Star Wars Bible, and if you were going to write fiction, like endorsed fiction, I mean, obviously anybody can write whatever they want, but if you were going to write something and put the name Star Wars on it, get it published by like Del Rey or like a publishing house, you were going to have to make sure that it adhered to the Bible, because right after Star Wars, there were a couple novels. Alan Dean Foster wrote a couple, The Splinter of the Mind's Eye, where like, Luke and Leia meet up, and they meet up and they crash land on a planet that eventually like kind of inspires Dagobah. I think it was a swampy planet, and there was miners, and then Vader shows up, and Luke confronts Vader and all this sort of stuff. Now, like, none of that is like considered lore anymore, but that script was it's been told to me. I don't know how much of this is real and how much, you can check me, and I'd love for people to like put it in the conversation below. I love talking about this stuff, and I'll admit when I'm wrong. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it was my idea that like if Star Wars flopped and he wasn't able to do the big budget Empire Strikes Back, that script was like 3-4 characters. He was going to be able to like do a small, version of Star Wars using that script.
Right.
And then he gave, Alan Dean Foster, to write the novelization of it. And that never came to pass because he got to do the big one, right?
Right.
I don't know any of this for a fact, but I can imagine that like one of the reasons that Lucas was able to do that was because he retained certain rights.
And
so he became possessive of those rights because he had a favorable outcome by doing that. So he held the reins on that very, very tightly. Now, Trek was like a TV show that was like, okay, this is Wagon Train in outer space. That's how like Roddenberry sold it to the studios, because the studios didn't want anything to do with sci-fi.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
It was all Westerns. And so he said, well, it's a Western in outer space. And then they were like, okay, we'll give you a shot,
Sure.
And then it's a 5-year mission. Well, after your season 3, boom, you're canceled. So, they turned it into a cartoon in the 70s. And then finally it came back in 87, Star Trek: The Next Generation. They had a Shakespearean actor on board, like it became a thing, even though the first season writing is admittedly, even the writers, some of them admit like it wasn't the best. DC and Fontana had some good stuff, but like there was some stuff there that was like, but in the meantime, there were all these people that were playing around with that universe.
Yeah.
The other thing is, so okay, I get, and like, so you go from like one thing is a Hollywood blockbuster with a creator who has creative control. The other one is like a guy who's writing other things too for TV, and so he's got a whole bunch of ideas, and he's not as like, he loves it, but he's not like, riding that one horse,
Sure. Yeah.
So he's a little bit looser with it. Also, the genres, right? So one is science fiction, the other one is space opera.
Yeah, it's space fantasy.
So in the science fiction, they play with all these this techno babble. They do have alternate universes. They do have other timelines. They do have time travel. So like you can do basically whatever you want in the Star Trek universe. You can have Spock fall in love with Troy if you want, because Spock's, Vulcans are longer lived, and that could happen, if they met in some alternate reality. not a
Yeah.
problem. In fact, some of my favorite uh, stories in the Star Trek universe. Well, the most recent one, I don't know if you watched Brave New Worlds or Strange New
No, I
Worlds.
haven't yet.
It,
No, I've
it,
heard it's amazing though.
it's not bad. I mean, it's like, actually, I think it's the best Star Trek I've seen in a long time.
Mm.
But it's got this one scene where one of the new characters meets up with a young captain, a young James T. Kirk. He's like a
Oh,
lieutenant. And they
yeah.
have like this alternate reality romance, like fall in love and this whole
Yeah.
thing where she falls in love, but then he spurns her because he's gotten Carol Marcus pregnant. And you
Oh
know what I
gosh.
mean? Like, and he's like
Yeah.
loyal to her, and the whole thing from like, Star Trek 2, the Wrath of
Mm.
Khan, Carol Marcus, and 3, I think too. But anyway, obviously I'm a geek. So like I
Yeah.
know all this stuff. So my point is, the genre itself lends itself to telling more and looser stories than the Star Trek universe does in a way, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But like I know like a lot of people talk about the Star Trek or the Star Wars universe, the Star Wars fandom being toxic towards each other, And there
Yeah.
are great divisions between like, people that are like, oh, the original trilogy, that's all there is. Or,
Right.
it's
Right.
almost generational. It almost breaks along generational lines, right?
Yeah. And that was ultimately like my big kind of takeaway from that is kind of seeing some of those things, like, you're right. In some ways it is apples and oranges, aside from them being sort of like the great, science fiction space adjacent properties in our culture. Um I wish that the Star Wars fandom had a little bit more of that generosity and a little bit more of what I have heard and seen from the Star Trek fandom. Because there is a degree to which Star Wars is kind of all of ours. There's it's been around for generations now, and there's a little bit of something different that we all take away from it. And I think there is such a divisiveness in that fandom, and
It's a
can't we
big
all
enough
get
galaxy
along?
for all of us, right? Like, we should be able to
Exactly.
like live in our, different,
Couldn't have said it
but
better myself.
but here's the thing that I think this both one of the things that happened to both franchises that kind of allowed this fandom to spring up was that there were large gaps between like the
Mm-hmm.
series, right? So like the original trilogy has this huge gap until
Yeah.
1999 when like episode 1 comes out, right?
Yeah.
So it is literally generational. And Roddenberry literally called the second series the next generation
Right.
because that's what it was. And so,
Exactly.
and he even had like in the original episode McCoy like make an appearance, as an older man to like kind of place it in its timeline,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So
Yeah.
it was very, very conscious. He was very conscious of that.
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
talk to somebody that grew up with the original trilogy, they see a big difference between that and the other properties. If you
Oh,
talk to a kid that like grew up with episodes 1, 2, and 3,
yeah.
it's all Star Wars.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's no division. They're just like, oh,
Yeah.
they're all Star Wars movies. And so for those of us who are of the previous generation, the Gen Xers, we're like, no, 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 no. There's a distinct difference between
And
the
there
styles.
is.
There was no CGI. There was this. There was that. It was all done
Yeah.
with models. It was all, there was more acting. There was more, like, and anyway. But I think there's some common ground. I don't know any.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that doesn't like the Mandalorian.
Oh my gosh.
I just
Mandalorian
don't.
feels very universally enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
I
they're
think
telling
part of that is
classic stories.
exactly, it's classic stories, and I think it's doing some of what made Star Wars what it was, which was leaning into the kind of pulpy adventure fantasy genre tropes. You know, The Mandalorian's a Western.
They've
It's
also
a
gotten, yeah,
fun Western.
they've also gotten some good directors.
Oh my gosh,
I
yeah.
mean,
John
like,
Favreau,
oh
Bryce
yeah,
Dallas Howard,
yeah, just
Dave
amazing.
Filoni.
Yeah,
There's others I'm forgetting. I know, like just the three off the top of my head.
and I think that Filoni loves the property. He respects it. He understands it. He's like
Yeah,
the heir apparent, and he just like, so
yeah,
when they're saying like, he's like kind of taking over as the creative coordinator, sort of. They made some announcement recently. Like,
yeah.
I think the property's in good hands. In
Absolutely.
hands of somebody who truly loves it. You know.
And I don't want to talk, talk down about anybody that was involved in um, the Disney sequels. But I do think that that was what it lacked, not just one like a one person. I mean, regardless of your feelings about any of the three movies, they all they they lacked cohesion. All three of them together are not cohesive. They didn't have one person at the helm, and to double down on that, they didn't have one person who deeply loved the project at the helm.
I
And I
think the
just
other
think
thing
about
is,
what we could have gotten if we had had that.
yeah, I think the other thing is, like, we are in this age of technology which we're blessed and
Mm,
cursed with. So like,
yeah.
because I remember watching all three of those movies, 7, 8, and 9, and
Mm,
coming out of the theater and being like, yeah, I saw a Star Wars movie, like that was fun.
mhm.
Like there was action, there was music, it was delightful, like I had fun. I feel like, I can use the force again. And like,
Yeah.
and I was a kid again for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, or
Yeah.
2.5 hours for one. But
Yeah. Yeah.
some of them were pretty long. So and even like episode 9, which is universally like, trashed, there
Hmm.
were like wonderful epic moments in there. That was a great D&D story, like it was an adventure. Sure, was it implausible? you know, Come on, it's like freaking Star Wars. Everything's implausible. Like,
I
are we
mean,
gonna really do this? And that's the thing. Unfortunately, we can watch this now over and over to the point where we can just pull it apart. And
I
it's
mean, you did anything.
nothing is going to stand up to that kind of scrutiny.
No.
Nothing. Citizen
Mm.
Kane's not going to do it.
Oh gosh, no.
Casablanca might not do it. Although I think
Ugh.
that's one of the most perfect scripts.
I mean,
But
Casablanca, what a classic.
it's just one liner after one liner, right?
Yeah.
I, I would love to play Louis. I would love Claude Rains.
Oh,
That dude is just,
yeah.
he's played so many wonderful characters, you
Oh,
know.
he's one of the greats.
Prince John,
Absolutely.
he was,
Oh my
in
gosh.
Robin Hood,
I
like
the first time.
Robin of Law, Robin of Locksley. That's all I've ever heard since I've got here is Robin of Locksley.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
just
I
like these
love
little.
I got to watch that movie for the very first time with my college roommate, which the best possible scenario of watching that movie because he has such a love for classic films like that. And I just remember the first time that Claude Rains showed up on screen because we're watching it in color. I looked at him and I said, "What animal did they kill and then stuff on his head?" Because if you watch it in
Yeah,
color,
yeah,
the wig he has is
yeah,
about like five shades, too bright and too different from the
yeah.
rest of the hair on his face.
I just take
But
that up
he's
to
playing
the
a goofy
limits of,
villain, so it works.
yeah, it was the limits of the production quality. You know what I mean? Like what they could
Yeah,
do at the
but
time.
it's a fun
But
movie. It doesn't detract from it. No, it adds the experience. I mean, oh, that's such a fun. And talking about Star Wars too, one of the inspirations, that kind of swashbuckly, adventure film.
oh, one of the best sword fights, when Basil Rathbone and Errol Flynn at the end, like one
Mm.
of the best, up and down the stairs and throwing candlesticks at each other, and like,
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, like just wonderful.
I aspire to be in that kind of fight, whether on stage or on screen. To oh, I mean that's the dream, right? To have like a Basil Rathbone, Errol Flynn style sword fight.
Well, I'm happy to bring that level of intensity to our next rehearsal or next
Do
lesson,
it.
if you will, because we were talking about the duelists, right? Because the next one
Mm,
after quarterstaff may be like the kind of like
yes,
you know
small sword.
Malsword. So there's a scene in the Duelist, which is a movie that we both love by
Mm,
wonderful director Ridley Scott.
yeah.
And Harvey Keitel is fighting a duel at the beginning, and it's a very slow, methodical kind of thing. But he has this wonderful affectation where he says "la," you know, "la," which in French is there, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful little thing that he does. And we were doing a little bit of that, like when we were doing the dodges, like "la," you know, like when we were throwing the swings, the swashes, you know.
Oh yeah.
And
Well, and that's important. We talked about that a little bit on Tuesday, but it's important to be making those audibles in stage combat because uh, a silent fight on stage is one of the most boring and also surreal things that you can watch.
yeah, and I think
I've
also
seen
it
it
adds,
before.
yeah, and
It's weird.
it can help with the cues too, I think, as
Mm-hmm.
well, you know.
Oh, yeah. There's so many times where I've been in a fight where it's sort of like hit I'll cue that with an audible.
Yeah,
Or like some,
yeah,
vice versa. I'll
yeah,
say that,
yeah,
or my partner will say it to me, and
yeah.
it's like, great, okay. So
Like,
I know when I hear that, it's time to do this.
right. Awesome.
Mm.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
then let's do that because I can do that. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's hard not to pick up a stick and just start making lightsaber noises, you know.
Oh yeah.
It's a
I mean of
everybody
course.
does that. But like,
Yeah.
before like the big swing comes, I'll growl or something. You'll be like,
Sure. Yeah.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the crescendo can actually indicate like when it's coming too. So like there's
Yeah.
a lot of ways you can do this on stage, which can be incorporated into the acting, the action, the acting, and the choreography all like kind of
Yeah.
coalesce. Yeah.
Yeah. Both Tanya and one of my older teachers, Sean Raleigh, were big advocates about storytelling through stage combat. It's not just, we're going to do something really cool for a couple seconds. It's part of the story and how people fight, the way that the fight goes, all of those factors contribute to the overall narrative of the play.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
Zoom is telling us that we're running out of time again. So maybe
All
this is a
right.
good place to stop.
Yeah.
We could go on and on. I know, like
Oh
you and
yeah.
I have a lot of common areas of interest,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to learn some more from your expertise because you have some areas of knowledge that I would like to edify in my own repertoire. So,
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy getting to chat with you about this. Let's do it again real soon.
all right, cool. We'll do that
Yeah.
again. And everybody have a good day out there, and we'll see you on the next one.